In this video, we will show you how to replace your vehicle's fuel pressure regulator on the Chevy Silverado with a 4.3-liter engine. This will be located under your engine's upper intake. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. Before we start removing anything, we have to make sure that we relieve fuel pressure from the system. Let's open up the fuse panel cover. Looking on the inside, we're looking for an area that says fuel pump. I have it marked in pink right here. This will be the relay that we're going to remove. Let's make sure we have it in the proper positioning so we know exactly which relay to remove. Go ahead and take hold of that and pull it out of place. Once you've done so, we can go ahead and attempt to start the vehicle. You may find that it starts and stalls out, or it just doesn't start at all. Either way, it's a good sign. Quick inspection, make sure we don't have any damage or corrosion. Let's try again. Perfect. Once you've completed this action, we'll continue on with reinstalling the relay into its original position. Press it in, make sure it's completely secured, and protect the area. Let's move from there directly forward to the negative battery terminal. We'll be using an 8mm to dislodge this and set it aside so it's making no contact. In this area, we'll be loosening this clamp with an 8mm or flathead screwdriver. You don't need to completely dislodge it, you just need to have a little bit of movement here. Go ahead and separate this. A quick inspection of each part, and we'll continue on just behind that. Take hold of this hose, give it a little wiggle, and slide it off. Make sure that's soft and pliable. In this area, you're going to find a plastic wing nut. Turn this counterclockwise and remove it. Now we can take hold of this and carefully start lifting it up and off of here. Go ahead and set that aside. Continuing on, we'll make sure that we cover the port leading into the engine. Now we can start removing some things from across the top of the engine, starting with this bracket across the front here. Now we don't necessarily have to dislodge each of these two wiring harnesses, but the one that you do want to dislodge is the one that leads over to the alternator. We don't have to disconnect it from the alternator, we just want to dislodge it from this bracket area. Now that we have that dislodged, we can start removing the bracket. For the bracket, you'll find that it's held in place with two 10mm headed nuts. There's one over here and one just on the side of that throttle body. Now we can maneuver the bracket around. You're going to find that the bracket also has your throttle cable attached to it. If we were to follow that throttle cable, you'll see that it makes its way along the passenger side of the throttle body, loops around this area, and connects in on the far port along the passenger side rear. To remove the cable from this area, you can take hold of this valve, give it a little twist. That's going to cause some slack on that throttle cable. With the slack on the cable, we'll go ahead and pull that right out of place, give it a quick inspection, and set it aside for now. Slide it right out. Double check to make sure your throttle cable is not damaged, frayed, or anything the like. This one looks fine. With the cable detached, let's continue on with removing the bracket. This is held in place with 3 pieces of 10mm mounting hardware, 2 studs, and 1 nut. You have one mounting nut over here. The second one will be located along the front of the throttle body. can pull everything aside as needed. Nice. After moving the brackets, we'll continue on with the electrical connectors along the driver's side of the throttle body. Each of these will have a small locking tab. Just go ahead and pull that away from the connector. Disconnect it, a quick inspection, and set it aside. Nice. Moving from those two electrical connectors, let's follow the wiring harness over to where it connects to the fuel injector, right up along the top here. This does have a locking tab. You can see the strap for it. We'll just make our way underneath, pry it up, a quick inspection of that locking tab. Now just behind that, you're going to find that you have a locking tab right here. And then all the way on the other side, underneath this portion of the wiring harness, there's a second one. This one's a little bit more difficult to gain access to. I'll be using an angled pick. Make my way under, take hold of that. On this side, same thing, and gently lift it up and out of place. If the cover pops off, that's okay. You can just reseat that. Slide that on now while we're here. Listen for a click from all four corners there. A quick inspection for corrosion as always. And we'll set this aside. Let's make our way over here to the map sensor. Quick disconnection. Continuing on, we have this red connector. Set that wiring aside. Now we'll continue on to removing this. Before you can remove it, you have to remove the bracket side first. Along the back side there, you do have a 10mm headed mounting nut that holds the bracket down. Remove the nut, remove the bracket. After that, we'll continue on with our 10mm to remove each of these 10mm studs. 10mm here. Let's take hold of the bracket. We'll lift it up and out of here. Let's go ahead and set that aside for now. Let's get these studs out of here. These two studs do also hold the upper intake to the lower intake. It's important to make sure that they are in good working order. Let's take hold of this. We'll give it a little wiggle and lift it up and out of place. Once again, setting it aside. That looks good. We can see that the harness makes its way across this bracket as well. We actually have to remove the entire bracket from across the top of the upper intake, so we'll be removing the two 10mm headed mounting nuts holding it down. Take hold of the bracket and set that aside. Moving forward from that area, we have a PCV tube which leads down to here. Go ahead and take hold of the hose portion right at the bend and give it a little tug, lifting it up and off of there. A quick inspection to make sure it is still soft and pliable and not torn, worn, or damaged. Here we are. You can remove that whole thing. If the PCV valve comes out of the valve cover, just go ahead and give it a quick inspection. It only makes sense. If it has to be replaced, pull it off of the hose and replace it. This one looks fine. Continuing with hoses, looking along this area here, close to where the fuel injector wiring harness was, we're going to squeeze on the 3 ears of this clamp, slide it out of the way, and remove that hose. You can use some pliers for this. As you can tell, this clamp is in very poor condition. We'll be replacing it. Take hold of the hose, give it a wiggle, and see if you can remove it. If you have a hard time sliding it off of there, you may have to use a hose pick to break it free. Be careful not to cause any damage to your rubber hose. That looks good. Now, if you were to follow the fuel lines along the backside of the engine, it's a little bit difficult to see, but there's a 10mm bolt holding this bracket down. We'll remove that bolt. Now with that broken free, let's follow those fuel lines up to the top of the upper intake. At this point, we're going to be opening up the fuel system. It's important to make sure that you're in a well-ventilated area while doing so, and make sure that no fuel gets on your hands or in your eyes. At this point, I'm going to turn on my fan. It might be a little bit harder to hear me. Continuing on, since this will be opened and fuel vapors will be in the air, you cannot use any electric type tools. They can cause a spark. We'll use an 8mm for each one of the 2 mounting nuts across the top here. I already have penetrant on, so it hopefully doesn't break either of the studs. Just work both of these back and forth. This one, it looks like the stud's coming up with it. You can separate that on the bench. We'll have a quick look at that bracket. I'm going to have to clean it up, give it a close inspection. If it looks like it's rotted and weak, you have to go ahead and replace this. When we go to lift these up, it is possible there could be some fuel still in the system. Be extremely careful. It's also a good idea to have some plugs that you could slide over the fuel lines to help prevent fuel vapors from making their way out of the lines while you continue. Looks like I got one of them coming up now. Just a little bit of a tight fit. There's one. Nice. Just lift up on these. Like I said, we're going to cover each one of the line ports. At this point, I'm just going to remove as much fuel from along the top area here as possible to help reduce the fuel vapors. We'll make sure that we dispose of this rag properly. As I mentioned, we will not use any electrical tools anytime that the fuel system is open. Let's continue on to removing the throttle body from the area, starting with this center point here. Use a 5.5mm socket to remove this stud. That looks good. The throttle body's also held down with 2 10mm headed mounting studs. Those are along the front. Remove the pair. Take hold of the throttle body and lift it up and away from your upper intake. You want to make sure that you protect that port so nothing falls inside of your engine. Let's continue removing the rest of the mounting hardware, holding the upper intake to the lower intake. On this, you're going to find that you have 4 mounting studs out in the open. There's 3 along the driver's side and 1 all the way over on the passenger side. The other 2 are going to be located along the back side. They're a little bit harder to get to, but really not too bad. Let's have a look along the back side here. You can see that we have 2 more of those 10mm headed mounting studs. Set that aside. Same thing for the other one. Nice. At this point, we can take hold of this and wiggle it around, but you're going to find that it's stuck in place because of the fuel injector in this area. We'll use a flathead screwdriver or a small prying device and carefully make our way in between the upper intake and the fuel injector and gently pry it, being extremely careful not to cause any damage. Just wiggle it around as we continue here. Nice. Now we'll have to lift this up and out of here. We'll give it a close inspection and set it aside for now. With that out of the way, let's have a look along the back side of the fuel injector here. This is where you're going to find your fuel pressure regulator. To remove this, you'll find that it does have a metal clip holding it in place. Go ahead and carefully press that out of position, being careful that nothing falls inside of your engine. If anything falls inside the engine, it can be catastrophic. For this clip, we'll just take hold of it by hand. You can also use a small prying device if necessary. You just want to take hold, pull the 2 locking ears away, and slide it down and off of there. Once again, we're being careful not to drop it inside of the engine. Now that we have the locking clip pulled away, I'm going to hold onto it so it cannot fall and take hold of the fuel pressure regulator, a little wiggle, and pull it right out of place. Of course, a little bit of fuel will come out of this area, that's common. Go ahead and set this aside for recycling, and we'll continue on with our installation. Now that we just pulled that out of there, we need to have a close inspection. Typically, when you look at the fuel pressure regulator, you're going to find that you have a screen making its way around, and you should also find that you have a small circular O-ring right on the very tip here. I'll show you what the new one looks like. You can see exactly what I'm talking about. We have our O-ring and the protective screen. Let's have a quick look along the back side of the fuel injector and make sure that we remove each of these 2 pieces. A quick inspection, and then we'll continue with our installation. There's our seal. There's our screen. Let's continue on to looking for that small O-ring. You need to get it out of there. You cannot double gasket this area. All right, there's our small O-ring. It's difficult to see with my black gloves, but it's definitely there. Okay, let's get ready to install our brand new fuel pressure regulator. Now, when you look at this, it's important to make sure that everything is properly intact. We have the O-ring down at the far tip there. We have our screen and our outer seal here. We'll just use a tiny bit of lubricant along this area. It's important to lubricate the seal so it'll slide into place easily and not cause any damage. When we go to install this, we'll make sure that we have this portion facing straight down. As you press it in, make sure you're holding onto the fuel injector and squeeze the 2 pieces together. A little twist as needed. Continue pressing. Let's get the clip in place here. Once again, we're spreading those ears, sliding them over the locking points on the fuel injector and on that fuel pressure regulator, and double check to make sure everything's seated properly. You need to ensure that this is properly seated, otherwise you're going to have a serious running condition and a fuel leak. With that in place, I'm going to give it a quick tug. Nice. Before we continue any further, it's important to make sure that you clean down the mating surface on your lower intake where the upper intake gasket will sit. You can see exactly where it'll sit, making its way all the way around the lower intake. Just go ahead and use a scraper and gently scrape everything away from inside of the engine. You never want to put anything inside of the engine. Once again, that can be catastrophic. We'll use a scraper and gently start pushing this away. Now that we have the entire mating surface cleaned down, it's important to do one last quick inspection inside this area. Confirm that nothing has fallen inside this port. Possibly an O-ring of some sort or miscellaneous debris. Either way, make sure it's nice and clean, and then we'll continue on with the upper intake. It's time to install the upper intake, but before we do, it's important to pay attention to the gasket area. We do have the gasket across the bottom making its way all the way around. And then along the top, we have the gasket, which is where the throttle body would sit. Go ahead and clean these down, give them a close inspection. Typically, it's a good idea to go ahead and replace the gaskets. Let's go ahead and remove each of the protective plugs from inside the fuel injector. Set those aside. Let's install our upper intake cover here. Before we do, we'll make sure that we unplug the lines here. Slide those right out of place. There could still be fuel left in those lines. You want to be extremely careful. Now we'll take the intake and rest it in position. Once we have everything properly aligned, you can start in the mounting studs. Don't snug any of them up yet. When you go to slide this in position, you're going to find that you have a little bit of a difficult time along the top of the fuel injector gasket. That's what the lubricant's for. Just carefully continue pressing it down. At this point, we'll be focusing in the center. As we continue bringing this down, we need to make sure that the fuel injector unit pops up into the lock position. The fuel injector itself does have 4 locking tabs, 2 along each side. Carefully take hold of the fuel injector and give it a loving tug up as you press the rest of the intake cover down. There we are. It's getting close now. We'll just continue on carefully with some pliers. Take hold of this area and give it a little tug. You may find when putting on the cover, the fuel injector unit just does not want to go up into the locked position. If that's the case, be extremely careful not to cause any damage. We're going to use the bracket that typically holds the fuel lines down to the fuel injector unit and start on each of those 2 nuts. You don't need to tighten them up, but you do want to make sure they're on at least a couple good threads. Now with the bracket on here, we're going to carefully try prying up on this to lock the fuel injector unit into the upper intake housing. Now what you're going to find is it only comes up so far. The rubber gasket's going to make its way up along here. Once you feel as though it's up as far as it can go, we'll continue on with our mounting hardware making its way around. Now that we have that fuel injector in place in the upper cover here, let's continue on to the throttle body. For the throttle body, we want to make sure we have it in the proper positioning. We'll carefully rest this down onto the intake cover there and continue on along the 2 forward studs. Those are the longer studs here. Go ahead and start each of these in by hand. We are not tightening anything until we have every piece of the mounting hardware started in the proper position. Let's make our way to the rear throttle body stud. Start that right in there. Let's get this shorter stud in along here. As we make our way towards the rear, On the passenger side, let's make sure that we reinstall our evap solenoid. Press that down on there as far as possible. We'll continue on with our mounting studs here. Continue making your way along the rear of the intake cover. We've got that one in. Let's make our way towards the driver's side rear here. Just starting these in by hand like I mentioned. Let's continue making our way forward along the driver's side now, starting from the rear corner there. Now we can get the forward mounting bolt in for the driver's side here. With each of these started in, we'll bottom them out. The torque for these is 80 inch-pounds. Go around first, bottom them out lightly, then we'll torque them down. All right, let's torque them. As for the center mounting stud here, for the throttle body, holding it down to the upper intake, you want to torque this to 89 inch-pounds. Nice. Now we can remove the mounting nuts for the bracket for the fuel injector. You may already have these off of there. We'll set that bracket aside temporarily. It's time to reinstall the lines leading to this area. We'll take each of the lines, slide them into the corresponding hole, and then continue on with the bracket and the two mounting nuts. As for the mounting nuts, you want to start them on, snug them up, and then torque those to 27 inch-pounds. Let's reinstall the bracket. Slide that right on there. Torque these to 27 inch-pounds. Double check to make sure your fuel lines are completely secured. If it feels like they can move around even a little bit, you could potentially have a fuel leak, and that's extremely dangerous. Take your time, inspect the area, confirm that it is properly secured. Following those fuel lines, we need to make sure that we resecure the bracket, holding it down to the engine. You may have to carefully maneuver the fuel lines around just enough that you can align the mounting bolt hole. Go ahead and start that in and snug it up. You want to make sure it's nice and tight so the lines don't vibrate and loosen up. Right there is bottomed out. Just make sure that's nice and tight. At this point, the fuel system's closed. We'll finish evacuating all the fuel smell from in the air and turn off the ventilation. Now we can move from those fuel lines, and we'll continue on with installing the hose that comes up along this area. This is the one that when I had removed it, I realized that it needed a clamp, so I'm just going to replace that now. Definitely want to make sure you have a good seal on this. Typically, you just want to take that hose, put it in the proper position, and take the clamp, slide it on there, and release pressure. I'm going to be tightening this with my 1/4 inch ratchet because that's the type of clamp I'm using. Just get this where it needs to be. When you do install the clamp, you want to make sure you can see hose on both sides of the clamp. This is extremely important. Okay. Double check to make sure that's completely secured in place. Now it's time for the PCV valve. We have the valve itself, which will slide down into the port of the driver's side valve cover. Now we'll follow the other end. That leads up to this port right here. Slide it down, listen for a click, make sure each end is properly secured. Let's continue on to the wiring harness bracket. This bracket itself will sit onto the studs that are right along the top of the upper intake cover. Once you have that in place, continue on with your two 10mm headed mounting nuts. Start them on, snug them up. There's that one. There we are. Double check that bracket. We want to ensure that it is properly secured. And now we'll continue on with the wiring harness up along the top of the fuel injector. For this, you want to make sure that you align it, press it down, listen for a click from the locking tabs, and then lock it in with that gray lock. We'll just double check along each side here to ensure that it's properly locked down. We don't want to have a running condition. Slide in the lock. Double check to make sure everything's secured properly. Now let's move towards the throttle body. We have a couple more wiring harnesses here. Go ahead and align those and press them in. You can't mix them up. They only fit one way. Moving from that side of the throttle body, we're going to continue on with our two brackets and our throttle cable. Let's start with the throttle cable and the throttle cable bracket. We're going to have to put the cable in place along this portion here. Now it's going to have to slide through from the outside straight towards the center, and then the rest of the cable is going to make its way through that groove. Carefully reach inside this area. We'll pivot it as needed, and we can install that cable. Like I said, coming from the outside, sliding it through towards that groove. Just press it right on in. You can see it right in there. Now I'll take the rest of the cable. Release that throttle body. A quick confirmation here. We need to ensure that it's properly seated. If it's off, it's going to cause an issue. Now let's continue on with the throttle cable bracket. We'll be taking this and slide it right down on place. At this point, there should be a stud that we'll be using. We'll use that right across the front here. We can maneuver this around as needed. Now that we have that started in, let's start on the rest of the mounting hardware. We've got our two mounting nuts. Get the one close to the coil there. Snug them up. Take hold of the bracket, ensure that it's properly secured. We'll continue on to the next bracket. For this one, it only slides over the two studs. You have the forward stud that we just installed, and then you have this one on the other side of the throttle body. Align it, get it in position, and start on those mounting nuts. After that, you can snug them up. Now let's move to our next bracket. This one's along the rear passenger side. We need to get this bracket in place and start on the mounting nut. Okay, it's bottomed out. Just make sure that's snug. We've got our two electrical connectors in this area. Once again, you really can't mix them up. Double check each of these to ensure that they are properly secured. Let's make our way back here. We'll secure our wiring harness. Now it's time for the air intake. When you go to put this in position, along the bottom of the air intake, you'll find that you have a hooked area that needs to fit around the forward edge of the throttle body. Once it has, we'll roll this down and align the mounting point. With it in place, we'll snug it up with that wing nut in the center. Make sure that's nice and tight. Let's get this in place. Now we can install the rest of our intake. Let's get this in position. There we are, tight fit. Let's pause there, make our way to the other end. This portion will make its way to the upper air filter housing. You want to make sure that this aligns as you continue pressing it in. You may have to try to twist things as needed. There we are. Once you feel as though you have it bottomed out, continue on with tightening each one of those two clamps with your 8mm. Confirm each of them are tight. You don't want any dirty or unmetered air making its way into the engine. Let's reconnect in our mass airflow sensor. Once you do press this into position, lock it in with your gray locking tab. I got a nice click from that. We'll give it a tug, lock it down. Reconnect your negative battery terminal. Start it in, snug it up with your 8mm. Double check to make sure it's completely secured. Okay friend, we've got the vehicle back together. At this point, you want to attempt to start up the vehicle. You may find initially that it takes a couple attempts because we have to build fuel pressure all the way back up to the engine. Once the engine does start, you need to make sure that you check for fuel leaks. This is extremely important. After that, while the vehicle's running, make sure you add no check engine light, no running condition, and then take your vehicle for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.